We're fearlessly talking about the biggest stories that matter to you the most. Breaking news, John Calipari is finalizing a 5-year deal to become the Arkansas Razorbacks' next head coach, covering college sports like no one else. The biggest guests in sports. We now welcome in Hall of Famer Jim Calhoun.
Such a pride I had, I came to connect.
The legend, Tim Tebow, joins us.
We'll run it back. I like it.
The legend, Herschel Walker. Welcome in, everybody. A little bit of a Thursday evening edition. Aaron Torres Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Torres. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope everybody's having a great day. Lot going on in the world today. We'll mostly stay in our lane, although I will have to share a few thoughts on Aaron Rodgers to the Steelers right off the top. But we got ourselves a busy show. And a lot of it is listener driven. So if you're a listener, if you want to share your thoughts, if you want to get your questions into this show, you can always reach out to me at Aaron Torres podcastquestions@gmail.com. Why do I bring it up? It is for one simple thing. First of all, my light just went off. Give me half a second here. This is the perils of real live podcasting. All right. So why I bring it up? A lot of this show is listener driven. Okay. We are going to open. I saw a Kentucky podcast talking about is it Final Four or bust at Kentucky? So I thought that was a great conversation. We'll talk about that. Obviously, I'm sure many of you saw North Carolina basketball spend an insane amount of money on its basketball roster for next year. What does it mean? Does it change expectations? And what happens if they don't meet expectations? Shout out to Pam, by the way, who last week asked for my way too early Final Four. Yeah, Torres is going to give you a way too early Final Four here before we get out of here. And speaking of before we get out of here, Phil Elson, our buddy from Arkansas, he covers the Razorbacks. He is here for a Super Regionals preview, breaking down all the big matchups, talking Arkansas, Tennessee, the biggest matchup of Super Regional weekend. It's going to be fun. We're talking sports. We appreciate your support. So let's get going. Before we get started, reminders, as always, subscribe, Aaron Torres Pod YouTube. On YouTube, new clips, new videos going up every single day. We just had Will Wade. By the way, Kevin Young, BYU head coach, joins us next week. Our college hoops offseason grade series will really ramp up next week, so make sure you're subscribed. Also, make sure you're subscribed on Apple and Spotify. Producer Matt already dropped the podcast link for Apple, so subscribe there. If you want to download a few episodes there, help us out. We appreciate your support. Speaking of support, know who else support we appreciate? Our friends, our partners, Collie Puffs. It's funny, by the way, had somebody, I think it was on the Will Wade interview, say, Torres, you talk about Collie Puffs too much. Well, listen, they are an incredible sponsor. By the way, if you ever want to sponsor the Aaron Torres Pod, you can reach out to me, Aaron Torres podcastquestions@gmail.com. But you got a lot of pressure to live up to the expectations that Collie Puffs has met as a partner of ours. Great company. Love working with them. For those who are not familiar, family-owned company, not far from where I live. This is the new age snack food in your grocery aisle. You don't need the Doritos. You don't need the Fritos. Be healthy. Get a snack that is healthy but delicious. Try Collie Puffs. Baked, not fried, avocado oil, no grease, healthy ingredients. But the best part is they taste delicious. The owner, Joey, huge football fan, Rams season ticket holder. You're supporting a family-owned company. So try them out for yourself. For more information, you can try them at ColliePuffs.com. That's CAULIPUFFS.com. ColliePuffs.com. You can also find them on Amazon.com as well. Just search Amazon, Collie Puffs on Amazon. We appreciate their support. Thank you to Collie Puffs for being a great partner of the Aaron Torres Pod. With that said, it is a busy Thursday. There is no more time to waste. Let's get to the topic of the day. There's like 7 topics of the day. I'll be honest. So we are recording before game 1 of the NBA Finals. Don't really think that that's a topic that we would normally dive into. A lot going on Twitter. Elon Musk is certainly very active. I'll let you look that up. That's not my area of expertise. By the way, Aaron Rodgers just announced that he is joining the Pittsburgh Steelers. So I don't know that we need to spend a ton of time on it, but I will say this. Interesting story, interesting timing. We'll see if it actually equates to the field, because I know a lot of you do love football, and so we'll just spend half a second on Aaron Rodgers. But let me say this. I do think, as somebody who covers sports for a living, I do think there are times where a story and a headline feels bigger than the actual results are going to be. Doesn't that kind of feel like Aaron Rodgers and the Pittsburgh Steelers, right? I mean, I think about this is that, one, first of all, I think it's so fun. First of all, the timing of everything, the fact that the Steelers waited until mid-June for this to happen, it is unbelievable to me. We talked about it around the draft. Were they going to take a quarterback? They don't take one until Will Howard. So this thing gets done. But the thing that really stands out to me, I hate to be like negative Nancy to start the show because we got a lot of hoop stuff to talk about. Isn't this a story that feels a little bit bigger than what it will actually be? Because when I think about this, I think about some of the stuff that we get so excited about in an offseason that doesn't really end up mattering. Russell Wilson, remember Russell Wilson last year to the Steelers. What did it mean? And then the season gets here, and it's like Aaron Rodgers is 41 years old. He's about to be 42. The Steelers they're a fine franchise, but how about this? I looked it up because I was actually curious. The last time the Pittsburgh Steelers advanced out of Wild Card Weekend, you know how long ago it was? It was 2017, okay? So this notion that they make the playoffs, they lost early in the playoffs last year, but this notion that there's some like elite franchise. No. Kansas City's an elite franchise. The Eagles are an elite franchise. The Rams are an elite franchise. The Steelers are kind of living off what they did 10, 12 years ago. And it is kind of the same with Aaron Rodgers, right? Maybe not 10, 12 years ago, but the last time he won the MVP in this league, like we think it wasn't that, it was 2021. We are now at we're about to be in the back half of 2025. And so you go like 2021 was that was the year that Baylor won the national championship in basketball. If you're looking for some context on how long 2021 was ago. And so he had an injury, then he had the Achilles injury, then he wasn't very good this year. And so this notion that he's going to step in and it's going to be this huge thing, I'm sorry, it's just hard for me to get excited about. I would say the timing of it was very interesting to me. It's funny. Listen, I'm not somebody like, I kind of like poking at the NBA because I kind of think they're, I don't know how to say it delicately, but I think they're a very poorly run organization. I think the finals ratings are going to be terrible because they've spent so much time promoting LeBron James and Steph Curry when there are other teams and other players to talk about that it's no surprise nobody wants to watch the Thunder and the Pacers. You never talk to us about them all season long. And so why I bring it up is the fact that this drops a couple hours before the NBA finals. It's like, if you're Adam Silver with your skinny little body and big old alien head, you got to be sitting there saying like, can I catch a freaking break? The NFL already hijacked Christmas Day for me. Christmas Day used to be an NBA thing. Now nobody cares. It's an NFL thing through and through. 2 games last year, 3 games this year. Then first round of the NBA playoffs kind of coincides with the NFL draft. It feels like for most of the first round, we're focused on the draft. Those 3 days completely take over the world of sports. Now the day of the NBA finals, Aaron Rodgers signs. So it just shows you, listen, I would guess, just knowing Aaron Rodgers, that it was probably intentional, trying to get some headlines on a day when people are focused on everything else. He's a Steeler, but listen, it's hard for me to get too excited because I just sit there and I'm like, still in a division with Joe Burrow and the Bengals, still in a division with Lamar Jackson and the Ravens, third best team in that division at minimum. And then on top of it, obviously in the AFC, you have Josh Allen and the Bills, you have Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, whatever. So Aaron Rodgers is a Steeler. Figured it is sort of the topic of the day. It just broke before we got on air, so I figured that we would go ahead and address it for half a second. With that said, though, let's get to the real topic of the day, at least as far as this show is concerned. So we talk a lot of college hoops, especially in the springtime, but this is kind of that weird kind of transition period, right? The season's done. Roster building of April and May is done. It's interesting. Most of these teams are now on campus. Yukon has started releasing practice videos. BYU's been doing it for a few weeks now. Kentucky had all of their guys on campus starting on Monday, Tuesday. I saw Jalen Lowe check in, Denzel Aberdeen, etc. And it starts to become talking season for college basketball as well. And so the topic of the day to me, I saw a very interesting question posed from Sources Say, the podcast at KSR. I think most people know, but I used to do stuff for KSR. I love Jack Pilgrim, love Sean Smith. But they led their most recent episode by very simply asking a basic question, but a fascinating question going forward. After a Sweet 16 in year one under Mark Pope, with a loaded roster that we'll discuss in a minute, might be the most expensive in college basketball, though North Carolina's making a run for the money for sure, quite literally. I think the question becomes, is this a Final Four or bust type season for Kentucky? In other words, if you do not at least make a Final Four for the first time since 2015, which sounds crazy, over a decade, is it considered a failure? And so first of all, listen, I think when I think about this, a couple things stand out. One, don't want to undersell what Mark Pope did last year. I mean, it's crazy to think about the fact that a year ago, he was just putting the finishing touches on his first roster. Gets that job mid to late April. It's a scramble. I don't think he got his first commitment until April 22nd, 23rd, something like that of last year. You fast forward, it's late May when the final piece or two comes together. And to Mark Pope's credit, I think he exceeded all logical expectations. To his credit as well, I think he exceeded all logical expectations in putting together this roster going into next season, the 2025-2026 roster, okay? Things started slow. Yes, there were some concerns early in the portal days when Donovan Dent goes to UCLA and a couple other guys that are linked to Kentucky don't end up at Kentucky. But I go back to what I said when we revealed our updated top 25 on Sunday's show, is that I think when all these individual pieces are committing at individual times, you don't fully realize like how good the team is and how much talent there is on the team, right? Denzel Aberdeen commits, but Jaden Quains is already committed. And, Brendan Garrison's coming back. And what about Otega Owe? Now he's coming back. And Jalen Lowe, he's really good. And, by the way, Malachi Moreno, Jasper Johnson, they were committed along the way. And then all of a sudden, you look up. And again, whenever I'm putting together these top 25s, I always try to, okay, what am I thinking in the moment? But then let's go back and let's reevaluate. And is there new information? And do I need to reconsider my thoughts on an individual team? And so, like I said, I had Kentucky, somewhere around the fringe top 10, probably a month ago. But when I went back and looked at this roster with all of its pieces, I said, to me, this is a top. I have them ranked number 3 in the country behind only Purdue and Houston. And I think this is a team that is absolutely capable of winning a national championship. And what's been interesting is over the last couple of days, it feels like that sentiment is becoming more and more common. I saw Rob Douster, my buddy from Field of 68, basically said, look, any conversation about national championship teams has to have Kentucky in it. Are they 1? Are they 3? Are they 4? Whatever. It doesn't matter. But any conversation about teams that are good enough to win the national championship has to include Kentucky. CBS Sports, I believe it was Isaac Trotter, did a national championship tier and included Kentucky. So it is now starting to become a thing, I think more of a consensus of this team is really good. This team has a chance to do something special. And so it circles back to the question to lead the show. Is this actually a legitimate Final Four contender? I take that back. They're clearly a Final Four contender. Are they a team that should be considered Final Four or bust? Well, what I'll say is a couple things. One, I don't like doing that kind of stuff only because of 2 reasons, really. One, you just never really know what's going to happen, right? You just never know what is going to happen over the course of a 6-month season. I mean, I think the perfect example is Kentucky. We saw them at their absolute best in November, December, even early January. This is a team that beat Florida. There weren't very many teams that beat Florida last year. Kentucky was one of them. Player for player, when both teams were healthy, Kentucky was every bit as good, if not better than Florida in that season opener in the SEC. They beat Duke when they were fully healthy. They beat Gonzaga when they were mostly fully healthy, although that was a game that Kirk Kriisa got hurt. And so I only bring it up because what stands out to me is that when they were at their full strength last year, that was one of the best teams in college basketball. Now, the problem was they didn't stay at full strength. And we've talked about it, and you know about the injury issues, and you know that it was basically from mid-December on, they just didn't have a full team. Kirk Kriisa goes out with an injury. Lamont Butler's banged up. Then Lamont Butler comes back. Then Andrew Carr's banged up. Then Lamont Butler comes back and Jackson Robinson's banged up. Then Jackson Robinson tries to come back and he gets hurt again. So saying Final Four or bust, it just doesn't, it doesn't factor in the ebbs and flows of a season, and you just never know what's going to happen. The other thing that I would say beyond that, and this is the part because, listen, nobody's ever wishing injuries upon anybody. You don't expect injuries. I think the thing that stands out to me more importantly is I don't like doing Final Four or bust type stuff, national championship or bust type stuff, because to me, I think it undersells the joy of following a team over the course of a season, right? If you set the bar of, if we don't make it to the final weekend, it's a failure. If we don't win a national championship, it's a failure. Then guess what? It kind of makes the whole season a lot less fun, right? Like the fun part of following a team, of following any team, is the ride, the journey. What do they say? The destination is actually the better part. It's not about the destination. It's about the journey to the destination. It's not about being at the top of the mountain. It's the climb. And I do think there's something to that, right? You look, NBA Finals starting today. Like, by the time many of you listen to this, we'll know who won game one, Pacers, Thunder. It doesn't really matter. But it's like, imagine if Pacers fans were like, well, if we don't win the championship, this wasn't fun. It's like, well, what about when he beat Cleveland when nobody thought you were going to beat him? What about when he beat the Knicks? What about when he beat the Knicks so bad they had to fire Tom Thibodeau, which thankfully Dan Hurley is not going to replace him. We talked about that a couple days ago. So like, is that not fun? Is that not part of the journey? And it's the same with every sport. I'll tell you this. Listen, this is going to sound like a humble brag or a sick brag, but it's not. But obviously, being a Yukon guy, I've seen a few titles in my day. And the fun part isn't necessarily watching the confetti fall on the final night, but it was the journey to get there every single time. And I look back at this last Yukon team that won a championship on the men's side 2 years ago. If I had just waited until the night they won they won the championship, the confetti was falling, that wouldn't be very fun. You know what was fun? Watching them beat the brakes off of everybody every single night. You couldn't wait to tune in to watch them again. Couldn't wait to see them cut down the nets for the Big East Championship. You couldn't wait to see them go to Madison Square Garden to play in the Big East Tournament. Couldn't wait for the opening rounds of the NCAA Tournament. You see them beat Illinois in the Elite Eight with a 30-0 run. That was the fun part of the season. So I hate this notion of, if you don't make a Final Four, it's not fun. And I think if you're a Kentucky fan, enjoy this every moment of the journey, because I do think it's going to be a special journey this year. I think it's a special team, a special group of guys. And by the way, Mark Pope has set it up where you have plenty of checkpoints along the way, so you know how it's going. And hopefully, if it goes well, plenty of moments where you can appreciate and enjoy that journey. Whether it's the Purdue exhibition game. Purdue, I think, will probably be preseason number 1 in the AP poll. They're coming to Rupp in the preseason. How awesome is that going to be if you win that game? You got St. John's in Atlanta. You got Louisville early in the season. You got, who else? Michigan State early in the season. You got Gonzaga. You got so many fun games. You got an 18-game SEC schedule. You got an SEC tournament in Nashville. Appreciate and enjoy all of these moments. By the way, enjoy, just enjoy it. I just don't like the notion of, if you don't make a Final Four, it's a bust season. But the one thing that I will say, I do think this is kind of the year where, I don't want to say we'll learn about Mark Pope, because Mark Pope, I think he's a good coach. I mean, if that makes me a hot take artist, it is what it is. But I will say, kind of, I don't want to say the honeymoon's over. It's just one of those where I do think the pressure is a little bit different this year. Last year really was a honeymoon. Takes the job in the middle of April, throws together a roster. Well, this is the year we're going to see what it's like with, 6 months of expectations in the lead up to the season. And I do think there is going to be a degree of pressure on him that there wasn't a year ago. Going into that Duke game, now I actually, first big game of last year, I actually picked Kentucky to beat Duke. No big deal. Thought they were going to be better than people expected. No big deal. But I don't think there was anybody that was like, if we don't beat Duke, there's some tough questions to ask. If we don't beat Gonzaga in Seattle, there's tough questions to ask. If we don't do, and so I do think this year is going to be different. I do think if you play Michigan State at Madison Square Garden and it doesn't go well in the Champions Classic, I think people are going to be like, well, what about this? Louisville. I know it's at Louisville, but that's a game that you're probably going to be expected to win. We'll see. I know there's going to be Louisville fans in here telling me I'm crazy, I'm a homer, whatever. So I guess what I would just say is I don't love the notion of championship or bust, but I do think there is a different degree of expectation coming into this season. Mark Pope, to his credit, he proved any doubter that he had wrong in year 1 as the head coach of Kentucky, the most scrutinized job in college basketball. But now it's year 2. You go back to the previous regime. Year 2, they make a Final Four. Year 3, they win a national championship. Year 2, in this regime, You have been given every resource that you need to succeed, and you have a team that is capable of doing special things. Like I said, I think they'll be preseason minimum top 10. I think in many cases top 5. I think they'll probably be right up there with Florida as the preseason SEC favorite. Now, I've said I think Florida, Arkansas, and Kentucky in any order is fine. But I do think there is going to be a degree of pressure, but I don't think that you need to sit there and say that it's Final Four or bust, although I think it's fair to dream big, especially with the Final Four in Indy. I don't think it's wrong to book a hotel room just in case or buy some tickets just in case, but I just don't like the notion of if we don't do this, it's considered a bust. I just think there's too many variables, and I think it takes away from enjoying the journey. But again, increased pressure on Mark Pope. Speaking of increased pressure, this is what we're going to do. We're going to come back. When we come back, you know who's got some increased pressure? Hubert Davis, North Carolina. Why is that? Well, he's not only on the hot seat, but we found out this week that dude had a lot of money to spend in the transfer portal during the offseason. We're going to come back, talk UNC's loaded NIL budget. And then last episode, speaking of Final Fours, Final Four bust, Pam, one of our great listeners, said, Torres, what's your way too early Final Four? We'll discuss that next. Quick break. Be right back. All right, we're going to get back to the show in a minute. But before we do, I have so many people that reach out and say, Torres, you give me hours and hours and hours of free content every day, every month, every year. What can I do to help support the show? Well, you want to support the show and look good in the process. Make sure to check out and support the Aaron Torres Media merch store at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. Some of you wondering, what can I get in that merch store, Torres? Well, Kentucky fans, we got our Mark Pope Hope and Pope t-shirts. That is right. Mark Pope monster first year. Year 2 is going to be even better. Get your Hope and Pope t-shirt at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. Arkansas fans, the Big Pig Invasion is coming. It is here. John Calipari has things rocking. Get your Big Pig Invasion tees. Again, aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. St. John's fans, we have our Big Rick Energy t-shirts. And if you're just a college basketball fan in general, guess what? Your March is for Day Drinking shirt. That is the shirt that you need year-round, but especially for the next NCAA tournament. You can order yours now. By the way, football fans, we got you covered too. Auburn fans, we already know the freeze warning has hit the plains. Make sure to get your freeze warning t-shirts. Also, Nebraska fans, new era, new rules, the t-shirt that you need before the start of this coming season. And oh, by the way, if you're a Colorado fan, if you're just a Coach Prime fan, we have our Dion shirts and hats, more of them than we know what to do with. So to check out the full line of Aaron Torres Media merch and also support the show, good news is we're going to have even more for the fall. Check out the Aaron Torres Media merch store at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. And for more information, you can always reach out at Aaron Torres Podcast Questions at gmail.com. All right, everybody. All right, back. Good to be back. So tighten up. Tighten up's about, and that's not Titan as in like the Tennessee Titans. We're talking about tighten up. He's tightening up that core by eating some Collie Puffs. So shout out to Tighten Up. We appreciate your support. I know Collie Puffs appreciates your support as well. For more information, colliepuffs.com or amazon.com. Just search Collie Puffs. By the way, they have a big announcement we'll get to on the next episode. With that said, let's go ahead and switch gears, though. We're going to stay on college hoops. And we're going to stay on college hoops because, you know, like I said, we don't get very much news this time of year as far as like news that's really worth diving into. I mean, we get a practice video here or there. We did get a very interesting piece of news here on, I guess it was Wednesday morning, when we found out just how much North Carolina is spending on its basketball roster for 2025, 2026. It's an awful lot, and I do think it does in some ways change expectations for this program, okay? So North Carolina, we spent a ton of time talking about, you don't need me to tell you, disappointing season a year ago. You know, listen, we could debate, should they have been in the tournament? Should they have not been in the tournament? They get in. They beat San Diego State in the, they call it the first four, but we call it the play-in games here. That is what it is. So they beat San Diego State in the play-in, and then they lose. They get smoked, actually, by Ole Miss. And so we knew it was going to be an interesting offseason. Hubert Davis said even before the offseason that changes have to be made. They hire a GM, Jim Tanner, he was a North Carolina alum, former NBA agent. So they hire Jim Tanner as their GM. And I think you kind of just expect this really, really, really big offseason. And they certainly signed some intriguing players. I do have them in my top 25, but it wasn't one where they just signed big name after big name after big name. And I'm not saying you have to do that, but I think given that Hubert Davis said, acknowledge we need a big offseason, given the fact that they hired a GM, I think there were bigger expectations. Well, I bring it up because the roster was largely set over the course of the last couple of days. We know about the international player that we talked about last week, Luka Bogovic, who we talked about on Sunday night's show. But I bring it up because, it's kind of intriguing with where the roster is. But what is more intriguing is the news that came out on Wednesday, which is exactly how much they spent. So I'll stop beating around the bush because on Wednesday, Inside Carolina, who, oh, by the way, this isn't some random website. Inside Carolina is like the OG of team sites and fan sites, okay? This isn't some made up way. This is like, they've been around for 30 years. They got credible reporters. There was a report that North Carolina spent, are you ready for this? $14 million on their basketball roster. I would venture to guess that's in the top 2 to 3 nationally. Matt Norlander put out a report that basically the top of the sport is at about $10 million. So when you're 40% above the top of the sport, it means that pressure is going to ramp up. I do think in some ways this changes expectations for Hubert Davis in North Carolina. And I do think no excuses. What's the old saying from Wedding Crashers? No excuses, play like a champion. Well, no excuses. Play like a champion, Carolina, because you are officially out of them after this report, okay? So first of all, by the way, before we get into Carolina, their roster, what it all means, let me just give the quick caveat. I want to make this abundantly clear. I don't care what anybody's getting paid. I care because we're talking about it, but if somebody wants to pay a kid $1 million, $5 million, $250,000, I'm not the guy that's going to complain. Players probably should have been earning a lot more money a lot sooner. We should have been paying people under the table. We should have had NIL in place. By the way, it has not ruined college sports. I don't think that I enjoyed watching Walter Clayton any less last year because he was making really good money. I didn't not enjoy watching Ohio State win the national championship in football. I didn't enjoy watching Yukon win the national championship. By the way, producer Matt's claiming that it did ruin his fandom. Producer Matt, you were sitting next to me at the Final Four when Auburn was playing. Don't tell me that you didn't care. Don't tell me that you weren't invested. You were. I'd say that you disappeared for 20 minutes after the game. But okay. He's saying that he enjoyed watching Walter Clayton less. Well, guess what? Bottom line is that NIL is here. It's not going anywhere. I don't care how much you get paid. What I do care about and what I do think is interesting is I do think that this changes expectations for Carolina because I think it changes expectations for Carolina. And I think it's interesting to look at the roster they have assembled because I think when you hear $14 million, one, a lot of people have invested a lot of money. Now, to be clear, some of this is going to be rev sharing, so it's not all coming from boosters, but rev share is $20 million for the entire athletic department. Virtually all of it is going to go to football. So a lot of this money, potentially 8 figures worth of this money came from UNC boosters. And so I only bring it up because I do think the pressure is ramped up and I do question one, where do they spend all this money? And then 2, do they have a team that is good enough to legitimately compete for a championship? Because I do think I'm not saying you have to win a championship, but what I am saying is that I think when you spend this much money, it does change expectations. And when I look at this roster, again, where do we spend the money? Listen, I understand there's some very nice pieces, and I understand there's some very expensive pieces. The Luka Bogovic kid, one of the best players in Europe. I don't claim to have all the answers on all the European players and all the power rankings, but 21-year-old, one of the best players in the Adriatic League, which is one of the best European leagues. I think if it clicks right with him, he's a guy that could be drafted by the NBA a year from now. And so I know he isn't cheap, but what is it? I don't know. What do we spend on him? $2.5 million, whatever. Caleb Wilson, 5-star. I know he's not cheap. I get it. I know what the going rate is for an elite high school player. It isn't cheap. And oh, by the way, Henry Visar, I think, is one of the best players in the portal. Comes from Arizona. We've talked about him, 9.5 points per game, hits 3-pointers. I think, listen, I'll do portal rankings at some point. I think I'll probably have him in the top 10 to 12 players in the portal. But after that, there's some pieces that could click, that might click, but nothing's a guarantee. Kyan Evans, the point guard, really good. But, listen, we start power ranking guards in college basketball. Where is he? He ain't ahead of about 2 or 3 guys at Kentucky. He ain't ahead of 2 or 3 guys at Louisville. He ain't ahead of 2 or 3 guys at BYU. He ain't ahead of 2 or 3 guys at Arizona. So it's like Kyan Evans is nice, but he's going to be a starter for your team. Jaren Stevenson, I would argue Jaren Stevenson needed you more than you needed Jaren Stevenson. 6'10" forward from Chapel Hill. He's probably getting. So the only point I'm trying to make is $14 million for this specific roster does feel like a lot because I don't see those difference makers. If you told me that, say, Yukon needed to spend $14 million to retain 5, 6, 7 really high-end players, I'd believe that. Kentucky, 13-man rotation, about 6 or 7 guys coming from the power conference level. I'd believe that. Even BYU with DeBansa and Richie Saunders and Rob Wright, I'd believe that. But Carolina, $14 million. But what I also think is true is that it does change expectations for this team and for this program in 2025, 2026. First of all, I wonder if this number was actually leaked to kind of put pressure on Hubert Davis to basically let the world know, hey, we gave him every single thing that he could possibly need to compete at this level in college hoops in 2025, 2026. And if he's not getting the job done, that's completely on him. So 1, I wonder if it's leaked, but 2, I do think it changes expectations because when you hear that the roster is getting paid $14 million, when you know that the high end of college basketball is probably paying somewhere in the $8 to $10 million range, it means that basically there's no excuses. You were given everything that you need to compete, and now it's time to go do it. Now, by the way, maybe Hubert Davis will do it. And I will say in his defense, 1, I do think in hindsight, this roster is probably better than I think we gave it credit for as it was coming together. It's almost what I just said about Kentucky. You look at the individual pieces and you don't really know what to make of any individual one, but you do look at them. They're going to be a lot bigger in the front court with Henry Visar, Jaren Stevenson, Caleb Wilson, etc. I do think Bogovic is kind of that star player that you needed. I think there's going to be a little bit more consistent three-point shooting. I think they'll be bigger on the wing with Jonathan Powell coming in. So I'll give Hubert credit. I think the roster's better. But I also think when you hear $14 million in a world where $10 million generally is buying you a national championship caliber team, you think that is a team that is good enough to win the national championship or at least make a deep tournament run. And maybe they do. And to Hubert Davis's credit, every other year, it's like year 1, Final Four, struggled year 2, year 3, Sweet 16, year 4, whatever. But everything has been given to him. We'll see what happens. And again, now the pressure is officially ramped up. $14 million for this roster. We'll see what happens from there. Really quickly, before we get to Phil Elson to preview the Super Regionals, one thing I do want to do, and by the way, I should mention this. It's that time of year. There's not as much going on. So if you guys ever want your questions answered, best thing to do, Aaron Torres podcast questions at gmail.com. Aaron Torres podcast questions at gmail.com. Send me your questions because sometimes they turn into really fun conversations and really fun segments like what we did to lead the show, asking if it's Final Four or bust for Kentucky, okay? But on Sunday night show, we updated our way too early top 25. And our buddy Pam, UK Till I Die, she dropped a very interesting question in the chat that I think is kind of worth talking about right now. I think it's a fun conversation to have in June when there's not much else going on. She said, Torres, you just dropped your way too early top 25. Who do you have in your way too early Final Four? Well, I've never done a way too early Final Four, but I figured what the heck? It's June. Let's go ahead and do a way too early Final Four. Now, I will say this, and I do want to put out a couple caveats, okay? 1, it's June. Stuff is going to change. This is my way too early Final Four. I am allowed to make changes to this by the start of the season. We got to get everybody on campus first. Everybody's not on campus. On top of that, I'm going to talk to people in the fall when we get players and practices going. We'll see practice reports. We'll see exhibitions. And so I'm sorry, but I'm not being held to these picks on June 5th of 2025 for a event that is going to take place on March, 29th or whatever, April 2nd of 2026. So I want to talk Final Four. And what I would say is, as we get into these picks, I think two things that I always look for in making Final Four picks, whether it's in March, whether it's in the preseason, or whether it's in June. One, I always say, you need a baseline level of NBA talent, okay? You need guys that can play at that next level. Every national championship team, Florida last year, Walter Clayton, going to be an NBA player. Alex Condon, going to be an NBA player. Thomas Hawk, I believe, will eventually be an NBA player. So one, do you have NBA caliber dudes in your program? And then two, I think this is also important as well. I think year over year, the deeper we get into this NIL portal era of college basketball, the sport has changed. I think it's harder and harder to win with freshmen. I think you need to win with older players, but you also need to win by retaining players year over year. Florida obviously brought back a ton from a season before, including Walter Clayton when they won the national championship. Auburn brought back basically everybody and then made a Final Four and were the best team during the regular season. Houston brought back a ton. The year before with Yukon, they brought back a ton. So those are the two things that I'm looking for in my Final Four candidates. Do you at least have a couple NBA dudes, and are you bringing back real production? And so let's go ahead and dive in to my way too early Final Four for 2026. Let's get to team number one. Team number one, we just talked about them. Not just talked about them, but talked about them about 20 minutes ago. The Kentucky Wildcats. Yes, I have Kentucky in the Final Four. Yes, I have them going to their first Final Four since 2015. Yes, the last Final Four they went to was in Indianapolis. We don't have to talk about how that one ended, but hopefully this one ends better. I do have Kentucky in that first spot. Listen, one, do they check the two boxes that I just said? Returning talent, NBA talent. Well, Otega Oweh, it seemed to be indicated that if Otega Oweh stayed in the draft, he probably would have gotten drafted. Jaden Quaintance, while he's coming back from injury, will be an NBA player at this time next year. NBA, he is going to be a first-round NBA pick. He is going to be a guy that probably goes in the top 10 if things go well. So Otega Oweh is an NBA player. Jaden Quaintance is an NBA player. I think Mo Diabate at some point could play in the NBA. I'm not saying he's Pascal Siakam, but he's got a lot of the same measurables. We'll see if he gets the skill set, but just Mo Diabate is a guy that can play in the NBA. I think Brandon Garrison, if he keeps developing, can be an NBA guy. He's a former McDonald's All-American. So, by the way, Jasper Johnson, Malachi Moreno, what did Mark Pope say when that team came together? He said, Malachi Moreno, I get asked more and more about Malachi Moreno every single day. And then two, do you have returning dudes? Well, Otega Oweh may be the best player in the SEC returning to that conference this offseason. There were only two dudes that made either the first team or second team All-SEC last year that are coming back. Josh Hubbard of Mississippi State and Otega Oweh. So I have Kentucky in that first spot, and I just really, listen, all the stuff that we've talked about all spring, we'll do our Kentucky offseason grade here soon, but all the stuff that we've talked about all spring, the athleticism, the speed, the physicality, the toughness, that's another thing that I'm always looking for. Do you have the dudes that when it all breaks down can just go make plays, right? Florida just had dudes that could make plays. Houston, create chaos, make plays. I think Kentucky has those dudes. They are the first team in my way too early Final Four for 2026. Number two in my way too early Final Four for 2026, it is the Yukon Huskies. Okay. So Yukon, by the way, should mention this because we didn't mention it off the top. I did do a quick segment on Tuesday when Tom Thibodeau was fired. I was worried that Dan Hurley might be leaving. The good news is Dan Hurley ain't going anywhere, okay? I'll say this. Even after I got off air, I talked to a few people, and nobody actually seemed like concerned that this could become a real thing. And by the way, it's not always just from Dan Hurley's perspective. I don't know if the Knicks were very interested. But it was funny. I have a friend who is a booster who was doing an NIL event with a player that night, and they were just like, player wasn't really that worried. So it just felt like once we got off air on Tuesday night, didn't really feel like anybody was actually that worried about Dan Hurley going to the New York Knicks. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there. I am all over the place today. I don't think this is my best show, but anyway, neither here nor there. But Dan Hurley is officially coming back. By the way, after we did that segment, it was announced that Yukon has agreed to a home and home with Kansas, which means that Yukon now has BYU in Boston, Illinois at Madison Square Garden on Black Friday. They have Florida at Madison Square Garden for the Jimmy V Classic, a road game at Kansas, home game at Arizona, home game at Illinois, okay? Or a home game against Texas. That is a monster slate. That is 6 games against teams that I have in my way too early top 25. And so Dan Hurley is clearly on a warpath, and I think he has a team to really kind of avenge a lot of the things that happened last year. First of all, a couple key returnees that, kind of the best of both worlds. Key returnees that could also be NBA players. Alex Karaban, I think now that the pressure is kind of off him to be the primary playmaker, I think we're going to see the best version of Alex Karaban. Who else? Solo Ball, 14 points per game. I think he could be, was one of the most improved players in college basketball all last year. Second team All Big East. He might be, I don't think it's crazy to say he's Big East Player of the Year this year. I don't know that I'd pick it. I'd probably pick Zubac for right now, whatever. But solely bring it up to say Solo Ball is back. Jalen Stewart's back. Torres Reed, who was one of the best big men in the Big East late in the season, is back. And then I don't think you can undersell the additions. Silas Demery, point guard that they were desperately missing last year. Malachi Smith kind of fills that old school Hassan Diarra role from 2 years ago. First guard off the bench, really good. Braylon Mullins, Dan Hurley has said that he believes he'll be a one and done. So I think this team is not only really talented, I think they have a real chip on their shoulder with how last season ended. Dan Hurley even said, this is the first offseason I've had in a while to really sit back, reflect, see what worked, see what didn't. The last 2 off seasons, he's been throwing out first pitches, ringing the stock market bell. And it's like, I think he's really had a few months to be like, oh, the way last season ended, we're not going to let that happen again. I have Yukon in my Final Four alongside Kentucky. Number 3 in my way too early Final Four. First ever appearance in the Final Four. That's right. Torres is Cougar crazy. I actually have BYU. And I know what everyone's going to say. Oh, Torres, you're overrating him. You said freshmen don't win. A.J. DeBonsa's a freshman. I'm here to tell you, A.J. DeBonsa's really, 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 really good. But that team is about so much more than just A.J. DeBonsa, okay? And I don't even want to undersell what A.J. DeBonsa does. But everyone else on that team is awesome, okay? Richie Saunders was first team All Big 12. I think he will appear on first team All-American list next year. He is back. On top of it, Rob Wright was not only one of the best players in the portal, but I think the perfect complementary guard to those 2 players. Averaged 11 points and 5 assists as a freshman in the Big 12 last year at Baylor, okay? If you can do that on that bad Baylor team, you can have success with A.J. DeBonsa and Richie Saunders. And I think the cool thing about Rob Wright, he is a guy that played at Montverde with other good players, with Cooper Flagg, with Liam McNeely. So he's used to playing with other good players. Keba Keita, we all love. But here's the other thing, and I keep saying it. Go watch the video highlights that BYU is putting out. They got about 4 or 5 guys that are between like 6'6" and 6'10" that are just high-flying, crazy athletes, okay? By the way, make sure you are following our Torres on BYU page if you're a BYU fan, Torres on BYU. But go watch those video clips. Dominique Diamande was a player in France that people believe has NBA upside. Came to the U.S., redshirted last year at Washington. Now he's at BYU. If it clicks, he's an NBA player. I don't know if it will. I'm not going to sit here and promise that it does. But if he clicks, he'll be an NBA player. The Mbop kid, I'm so sorry that I don't know his name. Came from the NBA Africa Academy. I have one of the NBA academies. I was watching him work out when I was on campus last year for the Kansas game. Kid is a crazy athlete, crazy athletic, big, strong, whatever. Xavion Staten. Producer Matt and I met Xavion Staten when we were on campus. 6'10". I think he's actually bigger. I think he's like legit 7 feet. huge 7-footer freshman, that rim protection that they need. Kennard Davis, the transfer from Southern Illinois. So basically, they have built, I don't want to say a perfect team because no team is perfect, but you take the two pillars of Richie Saunders and AJ DeBonsa. You have a pass-first, quick-twitch lead point guard, a bunch of athletes around him. I think they're going to create all sorts of craziness in terms of the athleticism and the problems that it's going to cause. By the way, I would add this too. I think they'll be much better defensively than they were. I just think that there is a lot to like about this BYU team. By the way, how about this? We're going to have Kevin Young on the show next week to officially talk about this BYU team. We got a few minutes with Coach Young when we were in Provo a few weeks ago for AJ DeBonsa. So we will have Coach Young. By the way, congrats to Coach Young, because as I'm recording this, I just got a press release from BYU that Kevin Young has received an extension as BYU head coach. So Kevin Young taking advantage of that Sweet 16. Fourth team in my way too early top 25, and we'll get to a couple, or way too early top Final Four, I should say, and we'll get to a couple teams that just missed. Michigan Wolverines. I'm high on Michigan, okay? And the reason I'm high is a couple things. One, Dusty May clearly knows what the heck he's doing, okay? Two, Yaxel Lenneberg's that dude. And I've said it so many times. I'm not going to keep saying it. He was the number one player basically in everybody's portal rankings. He was going to be a first-round pick. He could have stayed in the NBA draft. Instead, he's going to Michigan as a transfer from UAB. 17 points, 11 boards, about 4.5 assists per game. And the crazy thing is, I was talking to NBA people who spent time around him at the Combine. He is just starting to figure out this basketball thing, okay? Came to basketball late, played a couple years at JUCO. I think he's going to be an All-American. I think he might be National Player of the Year. Bunch of size on that team. Yaxel Lenneberg with Adai Mara, who was talking to somebody close to UCLA. People still don't not on staff, but like a UCLA person that kind of knows the program. They were like, why didn't he play at UCLA? He is, in my opinion, a player that can play in the NBA. I don't understand why Mick Cronin didn't play him. Morez Johnson Jr., I think, could be a breakout star. And I know people don't like the guards. But Elliot Cadeau, listen, Elliot Cadeau averaged 11 points and 6 assists at North Carolina last year. Like, the dude is a good college point guard. Now, I know he was a top 10, top 5 prospect coming out of high school. He might never be that. But he's a really good college basketball player. Roddy Gale, really athletic. Namari Burnett, really athletic. A lot of three-point shooting. I like Michigan. I think I can't say they're the best team in the Big Ten because Purdue is there. But I have Michigan as the fourth team in my way too early Final Four. Let's get to a couple teams that just missed the cut. I think I just said Purdue. Purdue's my preseason number one. Listen, there's some things I worry about. I always worry a little bit about their athleticism. It's hard for me to be too critical because even with the lack of athleticism, they easily could have beaten Houston in the Sweet 16 of this year. So we'll see with Purdue. They're my preseason number one team. I still think, how does Oscar Clough, the transfer center transition, Fletcher Lawyer can, just can guys take bigger steps? Are they legitimately the number one team, or are they like one of 10 teams that are in the conversation? So I have Purdue at number one. After them, Florida, is another one. Florida, I think, just missed the cut. I wanted to take them, and I think that as the season goes on, I think they're a team that might not be great on opening night, where they actually play a marquee game opening night against Arizona. They might not be great opening night. Boogie Flan with the adjustment. How good is Xavion Lee? The wing spots are kind of weird, but I think they get better. I think Florida's going to be in the mix to go to another Final Four. Louisville, another team that I think has a chance to potentially make a run to a Final Four. Plenty of shooting, Ryan Conwell. Plenty of shooting, Isaac McNeely. Plenty of shooting, Adrian Woolley. I love Mikael Brown Jr. The big man from Germany just came over and already started talking smack to Kentucky fans, so I love that. So I have Louisville in the mix. Other teams on top of that, St. John's obviously is another one. I think biggest concern with St. John's is Ian Jackson a point guard? And I think that's going to take time, but I think he'll be better over the course of the season. Houston is obviously a team that I think could be in the mix for a Final Four back-to-back. They're going to need some freshmen to step up. They don't have a ton of depth behind the freshman class, and obviously freshmen don't generally play a ton under Kelvin Sampson. And I think Arkansas is right there as well. I know anytime you say something nice about John Calipari, oh my goodness, you love John. I'm just telling you. I think they're going to be really good. I think the veterans are good. I think the big guys that they brought in are key. So Arkansas, I think, is in the mix as well. But my way too early Final Four, Kentucky, Yukon, BYU, and Michigan. All right, so what we're going to do, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back. When we do something a little bit different. Last week we had Phil Elson on. He is the college baseball guru. He is the play-by-play voice of the Arkansas Razorbacks. He is going to join us to talk this weekend. What happened with the SEC last weekend? Tennessee versus Arkansas, all the other big matchups. We'll take a quick break, get to Phil Elson, be right back.
What's up, everybody? It's AT, and I've told you before, when I'm on the road, when I'm podcasting, sometimes you end up looking like a slob. Look at me, mismatched socks, I'm wearing shorts. What am I doing? The folks at FioBox said, Torres, let's get you some fresh gear to look better when you're on camera. Well, what do you think? This is all part of the spring collection for FioBox. These jeans, perfect when I want to go to games, casual, serious, business casual, you name it. Got the quarter zip. And oh, by the way, we got this perfect zip. This is the perfect spring, summer zip that you can wear when you're out with friends. Maybe it gets a little chilly. Maybe it's a little chilly in the morning. Perfect for all occasions. So this is what I need you to do. If you like what you see, and you should, what I need you to do is visit FioBox.com. That's FioBox.com, FIOBOC. By the way, FioBox has a special promo code for listeners of the Aaron Torres pod. Use promo code Torres and get 20% off your purchase. Thank you again to FioBox. By the way, make sure that you're following them on social media at FioBox, FIOBOC. Thank you, FioBox.
All right, joining me via Zoom, second week in a row. We said we'd get Phil Elson back, depending on what happened in the regional weekend of the college baseball tournament. Well, Arkansas advances. Screw everybody else. Just about everybody else lost, but Arkansas is in. Phil Elson, of course, is the host of Halftime on ESPN Arkansas and the play-by-play voice of Arkansas baseball, best college baseball voice that I know of. What's up, buddy? How you doing?
Aaron, I'm great. Glad to talk to you today, which means that the Hogs advanced. It was a good, really kind of a dominant regional performance. And now this is the marquee super regional leading into Omaha. This is the only SEC versus SEC matchup. Interestingly, it's the only super regional that features a rematch of any kind. Even the one that's got two ACC teams, which is Miami and Louisville. They didn't have a regular season series. Arkansas and Tennessee didn't just play each other for 3 in the regular season. They played to close out the regular season, which was just 3 weeks ago. So they're really familiar with each other. And we know that, the storylines of the coaches knowing each other and all that. But I think that all that together and the talent level of these two teams makes this the marquee super regional.
Okay, really quick. Is there a cat behind you or is that a graphic?
That's Kiki. That's one of my, that's Kiki. I adopted her about 4.5 years ago.
Dude, that scared me. Sometimes, we got these weird Zoom background things. I was like, I think that's a real cat. I'm not sure.
You never quite know if it's AI that's over your shoulder or anything. But yeah, no, she's one. I got 2 of them, and she hangs out sometimes when we're talking sports. You just don't see her when we're doing radio together, AT, but she's there sometimes. Okay,
well, my little Charlie girl is in the other room. She may want to. It's about that time where she just starts causing havoc, so she may join the pod. She might want the Oregon State, Florida State super regional breakdown as well. So we'll get to that one in a minute. Really quick, let me ask you. First of all, you seemed confident but not cocky about Arkansas's path last week, and we'll get into the preview, the series this weekend and everything else. But I am interested because listen, it goes without saying, everybody else either lost or struggled. LSU needed 3 games against, or needed the final game against Little Rock, and of course we know what happened: Vandy, Georgia, Ole Miss, Texas, etc. Was it just the matchup? I mean, you're around this team more than anybody. I'll say this: just other media members who I see cover Arkansas, seem to say that this team feels a little bit different. I think the maturity was the word you used last week, but really one of the few really, really good teams that really didn't even sweat last week to a degree in their regional weekend at home.
Yeah, they trailed for half an inning, and it was the first half inning of the game. of the whole thing. North Dakota State scored a run on the top of the first. The Hogs answered with two. They didn't trail again. And it was dominant and overpowering in the ways that it's funny, you don't use this word very much with baseball as you do with basketball and football, but just a physical team that overpowered their opponents in terms of home runs. 10 home runs hit, 2 home runs allowed. In terms of strikeouts, 41 strikeouts for Arkansas pitchers, 17 strikeouts for all the other teams that they faced. Those are the things that show you an overpowering style of baseball in which the other opponents just couldn't match up. And that's what it came down to. And that has nothing to do with a poor level of play from North Dakota State or Creighton, the two teams that Arkansas played. It's just they had not faced teams of any kind that are that talented, meaning Arkansas. And I think that showed itself out in those ways, but that's also in a way that Tennessee does match up with Arkansas because they have the flamethrowers and they have the home run hitters. And so this is not a matchup of one team's talented than the other. This is a matchup of you can't make mistakes in this series because the opponent will be taking advantage of those mistakes.
Well, we'll get to the series preview in a minute. By the way, unintentionally, I just happen to be wearing my Tyson Foods shirt, so it's an Arkansas-heavy show. But I do got to ask, I think we talked about this on your radio show, but last week we had SEC spring meetings. I thought the league looked a little whiny about the state of the college football playoff, and it naturally led to SEC fans defending SEC schools, and, of course, everybody else saying the SEC stinks and is overrated. I only bring it up because what happened to everybody else in the SEC besides obviously Tennessee and Arkansas? And, I think there's 4 SEC teams in the Supers. But, listen, Greg Sankey likes to swing a big stick, but some other people were swinging back last week. What was the deal with all these teams struggling? I know obviously not everybody was a host, but 4 host schools don't advance, and obviously the top 2 seeds in the entire bracket. Was the SEC just overrated like they are in everything else, Phil, or what actually happened here?
I don't know if overrated is the right word. It's the same idea as in football. I think that the talent level in that league, both in baseball and football, is higher than all the other leagues. That just doesn't always mean that you're good, that you're a cohesive unit. There will be more players drafted out of the SEC for the Major League Draft in a month than there are for any other league in the country this year. And that'll just be, the 8th or 9th year that you could say that. It happened in football again this last year, even though the Big Ten has more teams. But that also the talent level doesn't mean greatness, doesn't mean great teams that know how to win games. And I think that was on display. Vanderbilt, the big problem for them was, what did you believe? Were they the team that really couldn't score runs for about 2.5 months there? Or were they the team that really kind of got by on the ability to score runs for a month leading into the tournament? Well, it turned out they didn't have the bats to swing their way out of the losers bracket. Same with Texas. Texas looked like a team that was going to need to win on real slim margins, and they did that quite a bit throughout the regular season. And then, you end up running into a hot UTSA team that had their number once in the regular season too. LSU, the thing for LSU is they have 2 great starting pitchers, and then they kind of got to scratch and claw the rest of the way, and that's what happened in their 2-game set essentially against Little Rock. But that's a scrappy team, and they're really good too. It's just kind of odd to think about. I don't know if Kentucky belonged in the tournament this year.
I know. Took Yukon's spot, but that's another conversation. We'll save that conversation.
Yeah, based on their resume, that might be overseeding the league specifically. And I don't know if I view that the same way I viewed Florida or Ole Miss being the last team into the tournament and were a really talented team out of the SEC. I don't think Kentucky was that this year. So, but it's crazy to think. I thought on your podcast last week, I thought I said this may be a world with 6 SEC teams in Omaha. Yeah, there aren't even 6 SEC teams left in the Super Regional. So it just goes to show.
Yeah, no, it's different. Let me ask you this. I'm just kind of curious, big picture. Schloss in year 1, and this isn't I'm not going to make fun of everything that happened last year, but, we've seen this in other sports where kind of in this portal era, new head coach, whatever, not really an excuse. And I'm not saying like, oh, he's not a great coach or whatever, But like, is it the same in baseball now with the portal where basically, is it one of those things where I still think year one I would assume would be considered a success for him. Of course, he came from Texas A&M. But is it one of those like he needs till year two to get his culture in place, or like is it just one of those, dude? It's the portal era. You're Texas. I don't know. I guess what I'm saying is like finish number 2. Is there like another step for them to take as a program? Like, was this deemed like a wild success? Was it kind of what I don't know. I don't even really know where I'm going. I just think that it's interesting that, kind of in this portal era, basketball, football, whatever, it's just kind of like, okay, there's no reason you can't be good right away.
I think part of it is also the job that you step into and what those expectations are for that program. Texas is like LSU. That's a place that doesn't celebrate regional tournament championships. It's expected. It's the same with Super. You're expected to be in Omaha on an annual basis. And so you look at a team that won the SEC this year. It's the most difficult. It is a gauntlet. That's an accomplishment. And I mean, I know people will point to something Schloss said that it's more difficult to win the SEC regular season championship than to win the College World Series. Well, I don't know. I mean, it's difficult to be able to compare a 2-week tournament to a 30-game, 3-month gauntlet, which really tests out your depth. And I think it says a lot about how they coach them through the year. When we saw them in Fayetteville, they did not look like a number 1 team. They looked like a team that was finding ways to win games. And I think that kind of ran out on them a little bit. That happened to the 2023 Razorbacks. They were at the end of that season, we looked at them and thought, this team went 20-10. That's an amazing accomplishment for anybody, but that did not look like a team that was going to do something like that. And they ended up not even making it through a home regional. So sometimes you think those things about teams that have great regular seasons, and then they can be exposed in a regional. That's regionals are about, if you fall into that loser's bracket, you better hit your way out of it. Arkansas wasn't able to do that in 23. They couldn't do it the year before. Texas was not built for that this year either.
Very interesting. Very interesting stuff. I think 7 of the top 16 originally are still in. How many teams do you think can realistically win it? And let me even ask you this. Like, and I think we did this a little bit last week, but like we talked about, Coastal Carolina hosting a regional, Oregon State, et cetera. I believe that like in college basketball, there's the difference between a team that can get to a Final Four and actually win the national championship. I always say to get to a Final Four in basketball is great, but to win a championship, you've only won, you still have to win 33% of your games. You still have to win 2 games once you get to a Final Four. So like in theory, yes, there are 16 teams that are all, still alive, but how many of them do you actually think have enough to actually run the table and win the whole thing in Omaha?
Depth is so much a part of it, or big bats and teams that can get hot in a way that you got to be able to stroke together a lot of line drives in that ballpark. Omaha is a big ballpark. It is the biggest ballpark that anybody will play in the college season. College ballparks are generally smaller. That's a major league size ballpark. Even bigger. I mean, that's a big major league ballpark just in terms of the size of the field. So you've got to either be able to string together base hits. You can't just rely on the home run. And you've also got to have a pitching staff that's deep, or have a couple of starters that can go out and give you dominant performances and keep you in games. Arkansas is a team exactly like that. They're built for Omaha, and their pitching staff is the reason why. We focus so much on the lineup and the home runs, and that's for good reason. And that's going to come out big in this super regional. It came up big in the regional. In Omaha, you got to have a deep pitching staff, and this team's pitching staff is, I think, better than people give it credit for, just because they haven't had starting pitchers routinely that went 5-6 innings, but there's plenty of relievers that are there to back them up, and even some of them that have emerged in the last 3-4 weeks. LSU has the kind of starting pitching that can do that for you too, with Cade Anderson and Anthony Ianson, and with the built-in off days. If you stay in the winner's bracket, they can make a lot of noise too. But this all comes to the idea that if Arkansas and LSU make Omaha, they play each other in the first game. So one of those 2 teams drops into the loser's bracket, and both of those teams do not play for the national championship against each other this year. So, I mean, I think those are probably in my eyes, the two favorites. You can't sleep on North Carolina. North Carolina had a pretty dominant performance in their Chapel Hill regional, and you can't sleep on Florida State either.
Wow. Florida State going to Oregon State this weekend.
Or even Oregon State. And I'll say for Oregon State too, because man, and they did this when they beat Arkansas in the 2018 College World Series. They lost their first game in Omaha and then ran the table. And then Arkansas beat them in the first game in the finals, and Oregon State won the next two. The Beavers fell into the losers bracket in the first game of their home regional, and they hit their way out of it. I think that's the kind of lineup that can get really hot if they get the right mojo.
I was going to ask, has it been a topic about reseeding? I feel like I've seen that. Do you believe in reseeding after the opening weekend?
It would make sense if you did that. We want them to do the same thing in the basketball tournament. We want them to do the same thing in the college football playoff, but I don't think they're going to reseed because, if you end up reseeding, then, what do you do with the matchup that's, that ends up with a couple of teams that make it through a regional that aren't seeded, or one makes it through and another one, like LSU and West Virginia. LSU is a seeded team. They're number 6. West Virginia was the 2 seed. Why would we have to match up LSU against, I don't know,
TSA or somebody,
like Duke or
UTSA,
Arizona or another unseeded team when they're already getting one right there? It's just I don't know if it's necessary just for the idea of fairness, because all you really are doing is you're building a bracket and you're going from there, and you just let the matchups occur where they are. That maybe doesn't always mean that the best 8 teams in the country are in the College World Series, but it doesn't make it any less interesting either.
Yeah, I'm not a proponent of it in basketball. So, and I think too, and this is very random and maybe not the best reason, but if you want to grow the sport, if you want to get people filling out a bracket, you can't really do that if you reseed after the opening weekend.
That's true.
All right. The big one, the big one that you're going to be at, obviously, Tennessee defending champs, Arkansas. First of all, let me ask you this. By the way, did you see Chipper Jones kind of throwing a little shade? It felt at Tony Vitello and the boys.
I think it was thrown at Volunteers, at Georgia.
That's right. I
maybe
saw
at Kentucky a little bit too. It's just an ethos, I guess, a way of celebrating your in-game successes that just are foreign to someone like Chipper Jones. And it's a value judgment thing, but I'm going to guarantee you that there were guys who played in the 40s and 50s that watched when Chipper Jones played and,
sure,
saw guys wearing earrings and all saggy necklaces and stuff like that. And they're thinking, what's wrong with these guys? It's a time-honored tradition for the previous generation to question a lot of things about the current generation. And I work for a program in Arkansas that acts like they've been there. They generate their emotional responses towards their own teammates, not towards umpires very much, not towards opposing fans, not towards opponents. And I like that about Arkansas. And that's going to be a diametrical difference between these two programs in this series too.
Let me ask you this. We've talked about Tony Vitello previously working at Arkansas. Is this considered a rivalry? I mean, obviously Arkansas has been great. Vitello coming off a national championship. And I know Arkansas has the historic rivals like Texas, whatever. Are we officially at rivalry status with these two?
I think so. And I think it really started from 2021 when the two of them got into a heated argument behind home plate after the last out of a series in Knoxville. Now, I don't think that there is any personal animus between the two or between the coaches. Arkansas's pitching coach, Matt Hobbs, he and Tony were teammates at Missouri, and they're close. But I do think that there's a rivalry in terms of they're recruiting a lot of the same style of talent, maybe not always the same players, because you go about your business a little bit differently on the field at Arkansas than you do at Tennessee. So it might be recruiting a little bit of a different style, but certainly the same kind of player in terms of talent. What it takes is they played for an SEC championship in 2021. But since then, it's just been a couple regular season series.
And one
They've
year, did
never
they miss
faced
each
off
other
in the
too?
postseason.
They missed each other one year too. I feel like it was a big thing that year.
These teams have never been in Omaha together.
Wow.
And they've never played in the postseason. This will be, for we're talking SEC tournament, which isn't the same as the NCAA postseason. This is where rivalries are taken up to another level. We always thought that Arkansas and Tennessee, once Tennessee got to where they are, which started in kind of 2021, that they would be a team that Arkansas would face in Omaha. To face them to get to Omaha is just as good. There was a season in 2019, Arkansas and Ole Miss played 3 at Baum in the regular season. Arkansas lost 2 out of 3. Then they played 3 at Baum in the super regionals. Arkansas took 2 out of 3 there. 3 years later, Ole Miss beats Arkansas 2 out of 3 in Omaha to go to the finals. That rivalry got taken up to another degree because of the postseason, and we'll hear. And the fans, I don't think, like each other very much either.
Anything else stand out going into this weekend besides that? That's obviously, it's not just because you're the Arkansas guy. You said it off the top. It is the premier showcase, event. It's funny, it's must be an Arkansas thing, premier opening game of the NCAA tournament with Kansas, premier, second round game with St. John's. Now we got premier super regional. I know you don't have time to watch pretty much anything other than the 2 to 3 games that you'll be covering, but anything else stand out in terms of the bracket that interests you?
Well, I mean, an all ACC matchup of Miami and Louisville, I think, is really interesting. Also, that those teams did not face each other. Can UCLA get back to the promised land for the first time since they won a national championship against a team that nobody would have ever thought would win a regional in Austin and UTSA? I'm hoping one of these Cinderellas makes it through on our side of the bracket, and not for selfish reasons. I just think it's really cool when that happens in college baseball. Fresno State, Stony Brook, UTSA and Murray State would be stories just like that. That's akin to George Mason and VCU and Butler. That's awesome when that kind of thing happens. Even Duke hasn't been to Omaha since 1961.
Wow.
So they're hosting at their on-campus facility, which is tiny, and you would never think it's a place that would host a super regional, but just the luck of the postseason worked out that way. I'll bet you that's going to be a really cool super regional too. Either Duke or Murray State, either one of them is really a Cinderella, even though Duke has been pretty good for about 5-6 years now. But to have a chance to get to Omaha for the first time since Kennedy was in office, I mean, all of that stuff is just really cool. Oregon State, Florida State is really fun. I love how Link Jarrett's brought that program back to prominence where they belong. And I think the Oregon State story with them being the Notre Dame of college baseball this year is incredible. And the way they made it through their regional, I think, was incredible too. Auburn being the only other team, there is a guarantee there'll be one SEC team in Omaha, but there's no guarantee there'll be 2. Watch out for West Virginia. They've been scary all year. And Coastal Carolina, is sooner or later, one of these Sun Belt teams is going to break through, because the Sun Belt is kind of, right there near the Power 4 in college baseball, and Coastal Carolina could be that team to break through.
I was watching the Hattiesburg Regional on Monday night, and Southern Miss was right on the brink there for a minute. Of course, proud Sun Belt program. So yeah,
that's right.
I think that's it. Obviously, you being the voice of the Razorbacks, I can't have you make a prediction. It's it's unprofessional, even though I think I know where you lean. Any last thoughts on that regional, and then we'll get you out of here? Just what's going to happen at Baum Walker Stadium this week?
I just think that if you're looking for a separator between these two teams, it's an amount of fundamental play in the field for Arkansas. They've been a steady glove team. That's not an equalizer. That's a separator in the game of baseball.
Yeah.
There's an amount of trust that goes with it. They're good in the field. Pitchers trust them. They'll throw strikes. Our pitchers trust their stuff. They throw strikes. They're dominant strikes. That's where a lot of those strikeouts come from. A big separator in the series in Baum were 4 errors made by Tennessee and about 3 or 4 other mistakes in the field that'll cost a base. One base makes a massive difference sometimes in a game that's decided by 1 or 2 runs. That, to me, can be the difference in this super regional, too. Both teams hit for power. Both teams have lightning arms. Both teams have deep lineups that can hurt you 1 through 9. And the other thing to remember, so Tennessee does not have their starting catcher, Cannon Peebles, for the first game. He was ejected in the last game of the Knoxville regional for arguing balls and strikes. And so that goes with a 1-game suspension. So they're starting a redshirt freshman who I'm sure is really talented, but hasn't been catching them except for 1 game in midweeks, which means he hasn't been catching the pitchers that they'll be using on Saturday when the series opens. And that's a big aspect when it comes to trust. So those 2 things, I think, can end up being very big factors in just a 3-game series in which maybe you can shorten it to 2.
Phil Elson, you can hear him Monday through Friday, ESPN Arkansas, with my other buddy, Matt Jones. I'll be on Friday because the Hogs don't play till Saturday. By the way, major gripes with the schedule. I forgot this, but my buddy from Fox Sports Radio is actually the play-by-play voice of UCLA, and he pseudo promised me a Friday, Saturday, Sunday regional, and UCLA got a Saturday, Sunday, Monday. I do radio on Saturday. What are we doing with this schedule here? Get UCLA on a Friday night, people. But anyway, so it's been a long time since I've been to a college baseball game, but still, I'll get to Omaha one of these years. You got
to get to Jackie Robinson Stadium at some point, man. That looks like it'd be kind of a cool place for a college baseball game.
I've walked through it. I've never walked through it on the day of a baseball game, but yeah, no, I had the whole Friday schedule planned and all that, but next time. So, all right, Phil Elson, thank you for the time. Who knows? Maybe we'll do one more of these, a week or so from now. We'll see, TBA, but thank you, and I'll be talking to you on Friday when I'm on halftime. Thank you.
I will write it into my calendar with this pencil that I use to score games, not pen. I'll put it in pencil.